Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Adam Hudson here, coming to you. Today is August 18th, 2025, near the end of it. Recording this solo episode sort of at night, close to midnight. So it's like August 18th, about to be August 19th, Tuesday. August 2025. It's been a while since I recorded another fireside chat style solo episode that I've been wanting to make regular. So anyway, here it is. There's a lot to talk about. I'm just go straight into it. Let me start off by saying, fuck Israel. I mean, that country is a pariah state. It is hated, rightfully so, by so many countries and people around the world, just because it is the naked, open genocide in rhetoric and action, and then this constant it's self-defense. It's all bullshit. This genocide is not about the hostages. Proof of which, I was just right before I started recording, I was looking up the news. There's been another ceasefire proposal. This one mediated by Egypt and Qatar, similar to these other previous ceasefires that Israel violated, by the way. Basically, like I said, Egypt and Qatar, they're the ones who mediated the ceasefire proposal, and essentially what the proposal, which Hamas accepted, by the way. So Hamas told Egypt and Qatar that it accepted the latest ceasefire proposal, and basically it calls for a 60-day halt to military operations, where basically it would call on Israel to allow in humanitarian aid, which, I mean, Israel is deliberately starving people. During that 60-day period, half of the 50 remaining Israeli hostages would be exchanged for Palestinian prisoners. By the way, Israel has thousands of Palestinian prisoners held hostage, so that doesn't get talked about enough. We'll see what comes of this, but basically it further proves that as much as Israel publicly says this is about the hostages and Hamas, Israel doesn't give a fuck about the hostages. Keep in mind they had the Hannibal Directive, where basically the Hannibal Directive was basically which the IDF ordered, by the way. Essentially is to prevent Hamas from using Israeli hostages as a bargaining chip. So to basically, rather than negotiate with Hamas with the hostages as bargaining chip, Israel would and did kill hostages. Here's an article from Al Jazeera. This came out last year. But it allowed for the killings of captives from the very start of the war. So it says, so the Israeli army did deploy its so-called Hannibal Directive, which allows the military to use all necessary force to prevent the capture of soldiers during the October 7 Hamas-led attacks on Israel, resulting in the loss of both civilian and military lives in an investigation by the Israeli newspaper Haaretz has found. So anyway, point is, from the very beginning, Israel deployed the Hannibal Directive, which allowed for the killing of Israeli captives, because basically what Israel just made clear that they care less about the safety of Israeli hostages than they do with their overall goal of ethnically cleansing Gaza and occupying Gaza to expand its true aims of a greater Israel throughout the Middle East. So, that is where the fuck we're at. There's a Gaza tribunal. I was just reading this article. It's kind of like an informal, so kind of like the Gaza tribunal is sort of like a it's sort of like a people's tribunal, similar to the kind of international criminal courts. I want to get the exact name. It's more of a people's tribunal, like the Russell Tribunal in Vietnam. Yeah, similar to that. So it's not the same as like the International Criminal Court or the International Court of Justice, which the ICJ, that has jurisdictions over states that commit war crimes and genocide. The ICC, the International Criminal Court, has jurisdiction over individuals responsible for war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide. So the Gaza Tribunal doesn't have like the same level of formal legal authority that the ICC and the ICJ have. It's more of a people's tribunal, but still, I mean, I think it's important. I read this earlier today and I thought it was interesting. The headline is Gaza Tribunal calls for armed UN intervention to halt, quote, most lethal phase of genocide in Gaza. In the most recent free episode I recorded with Peter, I mentioned that, like there were some calls with the, outside the U.S. for, like, upping the ante in terms of action to take against Israel, which would include like armed intervention. And if I recall correctly, what I said on that, that is something I brought up. Yeah, that armed intervention would, at this point in terms of where we're at, it seems like the only option, one of the only options left, and that's actually what the Gaza Tribunal called for today on Monday. This is in the Middle East Monitor. The Gaza Tribunal on Monday called for an urgent international armed intervention to stop what it described as Israel's most lethal phase of genocide in Gaza, warning that failure to act will mark an historic failure of humanity. Anadolu reports. At a press conference held in Istanbul, the president of the Independent Tribunal, Richard Falk, Professor Emeritus of International Law at the U.S.'s Princeton University, and the former UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Palestinian Territories from 2008 to 2014, urged governments to bypass the Security Council and empower the UN General Assembly to authorize armed intervention. If we do not take action of a serious and drastic kind at this time, anything done in a more moderate fashion will be too late to save the surviving people who have been traumatized by more than 22 months of genocide, Falk said. The eyes and the ears of the world have been exposed as never before, including the Holocaust, to the transparency of genocide carried out in real time. It challenges our humanity. Falk criticized Western democracies for what he called complicit behavior while noting shifts in public opinion. We are trying to address the conscience of all people and encourage the kind of activism that will produce changes in government ahead, particularly an arms embargo and various forms of sanctions, including the kind of solidarity with the Palestinian struggle that proved so effective in the anti-apartheid campaign, he said. It goes on and on. I think, like, in terms of where we're at, the bare minimum what should be done is that the United States should have like a full-on arms embargo against Israel. Just no arms, nothing. No financial support for Israel, no military support, absolutely nothing, no political support. I mean, obviously the likelihood of that happening is pretty slim, but I think that would be the bare fucking minimum for what the U.S. should do. In terms of where we're at, I think we're at the point where the only thing that will prevent Israel from carrying out its true aims is international armed intervention. And even like what the Gaza Tribunal was saying is basically bypassing the Security Council. And by the way, guess who sits on the UN Security Council, which has veto power? The United States. So the U.S., Great Britain, France, Russia, China, they're on the Security Council, and that is what the U.S. has used for decades to let Israel get away with whatever the fuck it wants to, going back to the aftermath of the 1967 war, which basically where laid out like the borders for like, a supposed independent Palestinian state and Israel. So like there's Israel proper, and then there's the West Bank and the Gaza Strip that was supposed to make up an independent Palestinian state. But since 1967, Israel has been steadily expanding settlements into the West Bank to the point where the West Bank, if you were to look at it, it looks like fucking Swiss cheese. So like even if you were to have a Palestinian state, what the fuck would the Palestinians have? So on the one hand, the West Bank, Israel's fucking carved up like Swiss cheese, and not only have they expanded fucking settlements, but like they use a land grab to get a lot of water and farm territory. So they're cutting off Palestinians from access to water and land. And then with the Gaza Strip, if there have been videos of this, people have flown over, and the Gaza Strip is just rubble at this point. A couple days ago, Israel, I think this is like beginning like 2 weeks ago or something, but it was earlier this month. Israel announced its plans to reoccupy Gaza. And so as Israel moves forward with this plan to occupy Gaza, just recently there's been this ceasefire proposal mediated by Egypt and Qatar, which Hamas agreed to. It doesn't seem like Israel's gonna like take it seriously. I mean, if they did agree to a ceasefire, they're gonna fucking violate it anyway, like they did before, like they've done several times. Like the thing I want to get across in this solo episode, something I've been thinking about, is the Imperial Boomerang. Because especially with President Trump sending in the National Guard to Washington D.C., there's a bunch of stuff I want to talk about. But first, as I dive further into something I wanted to kind of follow up on in the previous free episode, because I brought up the Breaking Point's interview with Senator Elisa Slotkin. So when Bernie Sanders, the joint resolutions he proposed in the Senate to cut off military aid to Israel, California Senators Adam Schiff and Alex Padilla voted against the resolutions, while Slotkin, she abstained. The reason why she abstained is the day of the vote, she made an appearance on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. So I guess it was more important for Slotkin to be interviewed by Colbert than vote on using her power as a senator to mitigate Israel's ability to commit further genocide and slaughter and degradation. So anyway, one of the major pieces of news I wanted to share was obviously the killing of Palestinian journalist I believe that was August 10th. I have my notes in front of me. Yeah, August 10th. Israel killed Anas al-Sharif, who was basically like the voice of the Palestinian people. He left a will and testament. He was 28 years old, by the way, and he knew he was going to die. And Israel had threatened him before. Let me. I want to read the full words of his last will, his final message. Because I think it's important to amplify. This is my will and my final message. If my words reach you, know that Israel has succeeded in killing me and silencing my voice. First, peace be upon you and God's mercy and blessings. God knows I gave all I had, strength and effort, to be a support and a voice for my people ever since I opened my eyes to life in the alleys of the Jabalia refugee camp. My hope was to live long enough to return with my family and loved ones to our original home, al-Majdal, now under occupation. But God's will came first, and his decree is final. I have lived pain in all its details and tasted loss many times. Yet I never stopped telling the truth. So Ascalon al-Majdal, that's the name of his town. Okay. Continuing. I have lived in pain in all its details and tasted loss many times. Yet I never stopped telling the truth as it is, without falsification or distortion, so that God may bear witness over those who stayed silent, accepted our killing, and did nothing to stop the massacre our people have endured for more than a year and a half. I entrust you with Palestine, the jewel of the Muslim crown and the heartbeat of every free person in the world. I entrust you with his people and children, whose pure bodies have been crushed under Israeli bombs and missiles. Do not let chains silence you or borders restrain you. Be bridges toward the liberation of the land and its people until the sun of dignity and freedom rises over our stolen homeland. I entrust you with my family, my beloved daughter Sham, my dear son Salah, my mother whose prayers were my fortress, and my steadfast wife Bayan, Salah, who carry the responsibility in my absence with strength and faith. Stand by them after God. If I die steadfast in my principles. I bear witness that I am content with God's decree, certain of our meeting, and convinced that what is with God is better and everlasting. O God, accept me among the martyrs, forgive me my sins, and make my blood a light that illuminates the path of freedom for my people. Forgive me if I fell short, and pray for me with mercy, for I have kept my pledge and never changed. Do not forget Gaza, and do not forget me in your prayers. So, Anas Jamal al-Sharif, and I believe he wrote this on April 6th, 2025. So he wrote this 4 months before Israel killed him on August 10th. It wasn't just Anas al-Sharif who was killed in that Israeli strike. It was, I believe, around half a dozen other journalists from Al Jazeera. Basically, Israel wiped out essentially Al Jazeera's bureau in the Gaza Strip. Over 200 journalists. I think the number is somewhere around like 270. Definitely over like 250 or something like that. It's like over 200 or 250, somewhere around like 270. Journalists have been killed during Israel's onslaught in Gaza, which is the largest number of journalists who've been killed in a single conflict ever since like people have kept count of it. Definitely more than the Vietnam War. This is it's not even just like, you know, obviously, especially if you're a reporter covering an armed conflict, there is a risk of like being killed. It's not unusual for journalists to be killed in combat while they're covering a war zone. But, you know, it's kind of expected that like journalists being killed would be a result of like collateral damage. It wouldn't be like deliberate, because killing journalists is an obvious war crime. And there's also like, for both sides in any kind of war, it is in their interest to have a media narrative that paints their war effort good in their favor. But Israel just like has deliberately targeted Palestinian journalists, and I believe, let me double check the number. Yeah, like nearly 270 journalists have been killed in Gaza. Well, we know why Israel killed journalists, because they don't want any witnesses. Israel does not want any witnesses as it carries out its invasion to reoccupy the Gaza Strip. And as Israel moves forward with its plan to occupy Gaza, it's also expanding settlements in the West Bank. And like I said, this is all for Israel's larger aim, which is this idea of a greater Israel, which, if we're to look at a map, you could even Google it yourself. So greater Israel, right? Map. If you were to take a look at it, so the idea of a greater Israel, and it's basically, they're basing on like their interpretation of the Old Testament. So essentially, it was a royal grant to Abraham consisting of the land east of the Brook of Egypt. So it would extend from modern day Israel to Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, I believe like northern Saudi Arabia. Like they essentially, the royal grant. I'm looking at Wikipedia. There's a map in it of it. There might be different maps of like what it, the idea of a greater Israel. There's even a propaganda poster of 1931 from the Irgun, who were a terrorist organization, by the way, of Eretz Israel. And yeah, they wanted Israel to not just be the land that it's in right now, the Levant. They also wanted Syria and Jordan. So essentially, yeah, because I think there's like two. Yeah, essentially, the greater Israel would extend from the eastern Mediterranean, along with the Golan Heights, West Bank, and the Gaza Strip, stretching from the Nile River and the eastern Mediterranean to the Euphrates River. And for those of you who need a reminder, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, that is the origin of ancient Mesopotamia, which is modern day Iraq. And also the Euphrates River goes into northern Syria. And both rivers, the Tigris goes from Iraq to northern Iraq to the border of Turkey, and both rivers end in eastern Turkey, southeastern Turkey. So that's the idea of, yeah, this is what Israel wants. They want like a greater Israel. And so obliterating Gaza and reoccupying Gaza is one step, then expanding settlements. And Israel's not going to stop there. So going back to the idea of like armed intervention, because yeah, like, okay, let's say Israel like actually does like fucking go even further, right? Let's say they start like, Israel's been also bombing Syria as well. Let's say like, yeah, like Israel's been bombing military sites in Damascus. Like, let's say Israel goes further in Syria. Let's say Israel just fucking invades Syria. Let's say they start fucking invading Jordan. And then once they're and like, let's say they don't stop there, you know? Let's say Israel's like starts feeling itself and shit, and it's like, okay, they want to bomb Syria anymore. Okay, they want to, like, let's say they want to keep bombing Syria. Let's say they invade Syria, then they invade Lebanon, then they invade Jordan, and then they go into Iraq. Like, like, it's just the fucking, to halt Israel, you would almost have to have a military intervention to prevent that, right? Because those countries aren't going to take it lightly. Like, wait, what? Like, you're going to fucking invade us? Like, they're going to respond militarily. I mean, yeah, I really think that an armed military intervention from the international community would, this we're at this point where it would take that to prevent this shit, to not just halt a genocide, but also prevent Israel from wanting to do his fucking Greater Israel goal, which would spark even further conflict. Because again, like, let's say Israel goes forward with the Greater Israel. It's like, all right, we're gonna fucking invade Lebanon, fucking invade Syria, invade Jordan, and then invade Iraq. Like, and also, like, how's Iran gonna feel about that? Because let's say Israel, like, is feeling really ballsy. It's like, we're gonna fucking invade Iraq. Iran is right next door. And Israel and the U.S. have bombed Iran. Like, you think Iran's going to take that lightly? Like, at that point, Iran would be stupid not to develop a nuclear weapon. Because here you have this country that already has nuclear weapons, and it's like, already committed a genocide, then wants to invade more countries to establish a Greater Israel. Iran's going to look at that and be like, okay, we're going to have nuclear weapons, because the nuclear weapon would be a deterrent from Israel wanting to invade Iran. Rest in peace to Anas al-Sharif and all the other journalists, brave Palestinian journalists who've been killed in this nearly 2-year genocidal war, or genocide, really. Speaking of the Imperial Boomerang and bringing it back home, the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, we didn't really mention this too much on the previous free episode, but something I wanted to touch on. Chris Smalls, he is the Black American labor activist. He is a well-known leader of the Amazon Labor Union. He was aboard the latest Gaza flotilla to deliver, humanitarian aid and support to the people of the Gaza Strip. The flotilla was stopped by Israel. Israeli forces, basically commandos, just just took over, the ship. And Chris Smalls was also the only black activist aboard the flotilla, and he was beaten and detained by Israel for several days. He is now home back in the U.S., and he's been on several media outlets talking about his ordeal. I thought his interviews with Sabby Sabs, Tavis Smiley, and Joyanne Reed were pretty good. By the way, Joyanne Reed, she's become, in recent months, much more openly critical of the genocide in Gaza. Her MSNBC show was canceled in February 2025, and so now she has a podcast, and that's where Chris Smalls was. That's where she interviewed Chris Smalls. There's something a friend of mine showed me. Butch Ware, he was a vice presidential candidate for the Green Party ticket in 2024. He was running with the running mate for Jill Stein, Dr. Jill Stein, and now he is running for governor of my state, California. He had a post on Instagram regarding the black community's attachment to the Democratic Party. Basically, the gist of what he was saying was, I mean, it's pretty similar to what I've said on this podcast several times, that black people have consistently voted for the Democratic Party, but have like gotten nothing in return. So he had a post. A friend of mine showed me that, and I thought I would tie it into here because something other people have noted, other black people on Twitter have noted, that like when Chris Smalls, was beaten and detained by Israel, he got very little support from the Congressional Black Caucus, and it's something he even mentioned on Tavis Smiley's show, where a lot of so-called progressives who supported him when he was organizing in Amazon warehouses, when he was, doing labor organizing for Amazon workers, those same people didn't really come out to support him when he was supporting the Palestinian people. And even if you look at like mainstream black media, like The Root, Essence, even The Breakfast Club. I mean, The Breakfast Club does talk about politics, but it's like kind of shallow. And even Charlemagne the God's politics, like, I don't know, he's just like kind of fucking goofy. I find it hard to take him seriously politically, but unfortunately, this is one thing I get fucking annoyed with. And like, someone like Charlemagne the God somehow becomes like representative of what all black people think. And unfortunately, depending on like which segment of Twitter or social media you delve into, I think people will point to someone like Charlemagne the God as representing what black men think. And as a black man, I'm like, it pisses me off because it's like, this motherfucker doesn't speak for me. But I think to people who like either want to make some sort of disingenuous argument about black male voters being stupid, or if they're just fucking ignorant and don't know like the diversity of opinion even among black Americans, they're gonna look at Charlemagne the God and be like, he's like their black media friend to like, so they can understand like what the quote unquote Negro thinks. But I mean, Charlemagne the God, I think he's a fucking goofball. He's somewhat interesting, but like, my point is not about him individually, but the state of mainstream black media. The politics of them are like kind of just like, I would say insufficient to deal with the issues that black Americans face. Like a lot of times, especially, okay, I'll take the Breakfast Club, for example, and then I'll delve into another example that I want to bring up. A lot of like quote unquote black mainstream media, a lot of it overlaps with hip hop media. And so what you'll notice is that a lot of times what they discuss is like culture war shit and hip hop gossip and stuff like that. And that becomes quote unquote representative of the culture in black America. And it's like, well, okay, black America has more issues going on than like fucking rap beefs, hip hop shit, and like some shallow culture war shit. Like, it'll be the same fucking thing. Like you hear on black Twitter, like black people complaining about interracial dating and blah, 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 blah. It's like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, yes, we can delve into like internalized anti-blackness and why, like, you know, black people, if they have white partners and blah, 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 but like, who the fuck cares? Because at this point, my feeling on interracial dating is that, like, personally, I mean, I think if you want to raise a family, I think for any group, it's best to stick with your own kind, especially when you want to raise children. But if you choose to date out and marry someone who's not of your ethnicity, for example, if you are a black person, a person of African descent, look, sometimes it happens. People fall in love with people who don't look like them. I mean, and also, especially in today's society where people are much more culturally integrated, like there's diversity is becoming more of the norm. People are going to wind up fucking people who don't look like them. It's just, that's what happens. You put people in like any cultural area and it's multiculturalism, it's multicultural and it's ethnically diverse. At some point, people are gonna get horny for people who don't look like them. It happens with everybody. Like, we're humans, people like to fuck, and people are gonna want to fuck and fall in love with someone who doesn't look like them. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but obviously, yeah, there's some shit you have to fucking navigate. And I think if you are a black person or a person of African descent, and if you choose to marry someone who, I'll just say a white person, I'm sure, like, yeah, you can fall in love with the white person, have a, good white husband or a white wife. My feeling is, like, you should do your due diligence in terms of, like, vetting that person, especially if they're going to be another parent in raising a mixed race child. Because this is my honest opinion. People can feel free to fucking disagree with me, but in my honest opinion, I would say the vast majority of white people are not equipped to raise mixed race children. In terms of helping that child to navigate the complexity of what it means to be half black in a country like the United States, in my honest opinion, a lot of white parents just fall fucking short of that. Just bite me. I don't fucking care. That's what I think. Doesn't mean, like, people can't fall in love with people who don't look like. But I don't want to dig too much into interracial dating. My point is that, like, this is the kind of shit that comes up in, like, black Twitter discourse and, like, mainstream black press. It's, like, very shallow shit that, like, yes, we can talk about this stuff, but, like, okay, there's other stuff we're fucking dealing with. There are other deeper, more complex political issues that impact black America. And even if they don't impact black America directly, we should care about them. Like, the genocide in Gaza Strip may not directly impact black Americans. However, there is overlap and connection to be made between the institutional racism that black Americans have long faced and Israel's policy of apartheid against the Palestinians. So this is actually a good way to bring up this, speaking of black Twitter and people causing a fucking stir and shit. So Marc Lamont Hill, he was on the Joe Budden podcast. And the Joe Budden podcast is like a good example of what I'm talking about with the shallowness of mainstream black media. And I see why Marc Lamont Hill goes on it, because he wants to add like the kind of, he's like the intellectual voice in like a podcast where, because I listened to most of the podcast. It was 3 hours long. And most of it was like hip hop media gossip bullshit. It was like, when I was listening to it, I'm like, what the fuck are they talking about? What's the point of this shit? It's just random, just bullshit. Like, why the fuck? Like, I mean, there are people who watch, and I get it. There are people who like, I don't want to pay attention to serious shit. I don't want to think about it. I want to watch stupid shit all the fucking time. And like, yeah, I want to listen to fucking Joe Budden talk about stupid shit. Okay, cool. But there's a place for people like Joe Budden. But like, unfortunately, a lot of the black discourse, people like him wind up like those voices are the fucking loudest. That's my issue, is people like Joe Budden and Charlamagne the God, like, they're the ones who got the loudest fucking microphones and the loudest voices when it comes to shaping discourse within the black community when it comes to issues. And it's like, there's a place for these fucking people, but like, this is an example of like, fucking pissed me off. So it was toward the end, Marc Lamont Hill, he mentioned that all of his Al Jazeera colleagues were killed in Gaza. And this is the response from the people on the Joe Budden podcast. Actually, I'll put the audio clip right here.
In D.C., which means you're going to see more laws, fewer like diversion programs, and more actual like incarceration. And then around the world, we're seeing violence everywhere, including Gaza, where I work for Al Jazeera. My colleagues, every colleague I have in Gaza has been murdered. Every single colleague I have in Gaza has been murdered. So we got a lot of work to do, a lot of stuff to pay attention to.
That's pretty good.
All right, Young Thug dissed, I get scared every time he do that shit.
He do it so fast. You gotta,
everybody know in Gaza is like, oh my colleague. God damn, he doing it again.
That nigga Mark, boy. Why you don't never support him when he start talking that shit? You support him very well, Pizza Hut.
He has my full support, but I also know that once he says something like that, or we discuss something like that, then we're just like, okay, what's the fucking pivot? What's the pivot after we talk about every journalist on the Gaza Strip being murdered? Like, what's the pivot?
So Young Thug
there we go.
appeared on Little Baby's project.
Quite the project.
Anyway, yeah, I was gonna describe it, but I thought it would be good to just include the audio clip, and I'll include like the full podcast episode, if you're curious. But as you can tell, like, everyone else's response is like fucking pathetic. They didn't say shit. Melissa Ford, she was like, "Oh my gosh, this is sad," but like every time Mark brings this up, I'm like, "How do we pivot?" And that pissed me off. I'm like, why the fuck do you need to pivot? Like, okay, you're gonna spend like nearly 3 goddamn fucking hours talking about bullshit, and then for like a minute, just 1 fucking minute, someone in the room is like, hey, there's some real serious shit going on, and I want to just mention it, while we're at it. And keep in mind, like, Mark was incredibly fucking charitable when it came to, like, he's incredibly patient with if they would have had me in the room, I would have cussed some people out. I would have been pissed. I wouldn't even fucking, I'd probably be at the point where I wouldn't be fucking invited. But, like, it's just so fucking idiotic. And keep in mind, these people are in their fucking 40s. They're in their fucking 40s. These are, like, fucking fat, overweight, 40-year-old motherfuckers talking like goddamn teenagers. This shit is embarrassing. Jesus fucking Christ. Like, this shit is a fucking joke, dude. And again, almost 3 fucking hours of bullshit. And just 1 fucking minute. 1 fucking minute. Marc Lamont Hill wants to bring something up. And Melissa Ford is like, how do we pivot? Why the fuck should you fucking pivot? Jesus fucking Christ. Why? Why fucking pivot? Why not talk about it? And Joe Budden's dumbass is like, hey man, let's bring it the fucking hip-hop beef with little people. Who the fuck cares? Joe Budden. I don't even know who the fucking representative. I don't fucking care about this shit. Almost like it's the latest hip hop beef, man. Who the fuck cares? Who the fuck cares? I don't care about any of this shit. This fucking all this like hip hop media is none of this advances Black American culture. If we're gonna be fucking honest, none of it advances Black American culture. A lot of it is just gossip, bullshit. Bullshit on top of bullshit. It does nothing to really preserve the dignity of Black American culture. A lot of it is fucking gossip. Ugh. But man, that fucking holy shit. How do we pivot? Why the fuck pivot? Jesus fucking Christ. These 45-year-old motherfuckers can't like talk about something serious and intelligent? Like, again, like, they talk like, fuck, these people are fucking jokes. Jesus Christ, some fucking overweight 40-year-olds and shit talking about stupid shit. I'm not trying to body shame or whatever, but, like, Jesus Christ. It's like, yo, The dudes, you guys got dad bods and shit. Like, y'all are old. You guys are in your... These dudes are in their fucking 40s. They're in their fucking 40s. And they can't have an intelligent conversation? You gotta be fucking kidding me. Oh my god, it is a fucking joke. A complete fucking embarrassment to... The need for black media. This is why we have this podcast. Ugh. Because too much of black media discourse is shaped by these dickheads. It is shaped by people like fucking Joe Budden and Charlemagne the God. And like, just... It's a complete fucking joke. We have trouble. I don't know how to pivot. Again, why the fuck pivot? Like, the entire world has been watching images of children blown to fucking bits. Children starving, emaciated. All that enabled by U.S. tax dollars. And for 3 fucking hours, they want to talk about these stupidest fucking shit. And then for 1 fucking minute, Marc Lamont Hill wants to shed some light on it. And rather than like talk about it, they just like fucking cowards. Complete fucking cowards. Jesus. Fuck, man. Oh my god. Ugh. Yeah, it was like 2.5 hours of stupid shit. But I brought this up because, again, these are the types of people who have, like, unfortunately, some of the loudest voices when it comes to, like, just black media. Because they have such large fucking followings. Ugh. Fuck. Mainstream hip-hop media, mainstream black media, in my opinion, Joe Budden Podcast being an example, and the Breakfast Club, I would say they are becoming increasingly out of touch with black America. And a lot of people on black Twitter, they have the same fucking reaction I did. They thought it was like, yo, what the fuck? So, the good news is that, like, there are more and more black people who see through this shit. And like, because people are fucking clowns. This is fucking clowns. What it is fucking minstrelsy. I will say, like, yeah, I would say, like, not just Joe, but I would say, like, the black celebrity class. There you go. Like, the kind of black celebrity class, like, they've become, unfortunately, like, the spokespeople for black America. And in my opinion, a lot of a huge segment of the black celebrity class are just, they're functioning like minstrels. This is basically 21st century minstrelsy. It's basically it. So, now, on a more positive note, Tavis Smiley and Sabby Sabs, I would say they are 2 examples of real black media. They don't just speak for a black audience. There are people who are not black who listen to them. But I would say, like, Tavis Smiley and Sabby Sabs, those are examples, I think, of today, like, doing, like, real black media. And both of their interviews with Chris Smalls, like, they had, like, pretty good interviews with Chris Smalls. And I wish their voices had more amplification versus the people like Charlemagne the God and Joe Budden. Because I actually think they're doing a kind of media and journalism and commentary that actually advances the interests of black America. They're doing it's a real public service. Oh my god, I had to get that off my chest, bro. Y'all have no idea how fucking pissed I was when I saw that shit. Jesus Christ. And that's also partially me just letting out how fucking irritating. I mean, I suffered for you guys. I listened to that fucking Joe Budden podcast. It was stupid. So my outburst was partially motivated by that because it was so fucking idiotic. Because I was waiting for, because I wanted to see like when it, because I saw the clip on X of Marc Lamont Hill bringing up the death of his Al Jazeera colleagues, and I was waiting like, okay, when's he gonna bring it up? And it was toward the end, and like I said, the whole podcast was like fucking 3 hours long, and it was toward the end. I'm like, I had to just listen to over two hours of bullshit. Ugh. I mean, I did other productive stuff, but good God, fuck, man. I don't even remember what the fuck they talked about. All I can from what I remember, it was just rambling of just gossip and some personal life stuff and blah 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 blah, like shit chatty. It's like, okay, whatever. Like, it's the fucking point. Like, I don't know. Some of these podcasts, like when I listen to them, I'm like, when are y'all gonna get to the fucking point? Like, what are you talking about, right? Like, at least on this podcast, like, you guys know what you're gonna get. We're talking about politics and current events, and we bring up political theory. So like, we get to the point. And even like with my solo episodes, like, this is me riffing off the top of my head, but y'all know what the fuck to expect. Like, when I'm talking either on my solo episodes or when it's me and Peter talking, like, we get to the point. Some of these podcasts, I'm just like, can y'all get to the fucking point? Like, what is this? Like, what is, like, oh, we're just hanging out, man. It's just a podcast. We're just talk and ramble. I'm like, okay, what? Huh? Like, can y'all just get to the point? Like, what are y'all talking about? It just goes on for like fucking, it's random. I guess I can see why some people like that. It just goes on. It's like, fucking, let's talk about this and blah blah blah. Here's my personal life, and my daily life sucks, and I'm lonely because I'm like, I don't know how to talk to people. Blah blah blah. And I went on this flight. It was like, and I'm like, no, I swear, like, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, God, like, fine. Can y'all get to the fucking point? Jesus Christ. Anyway, I had to get that off my chest because it was just 2.5 hours of that bullshit, and it reminded me of some other podcasts that are like, sometimes I'm like, can y'all get to the fucking point? What are y'all talking about? What's the topic? Anyway, I have my notes in front of me. This helps me stay on topic. I have fucking notes, so it makes me, like, when you hear like, makes me instead of vibe like a news anchor. Like, when you're talking in front of a microphone, you're talking about the news. You have like, all right, in the next hour, we're going to talk about interview with blah, 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 blah. Like, anyway, my point was that kind of the mainstream black media, like I said, I think they're becoming increasingly out of touch. But ultimately, I think what they fail to do, which I think is a responsibility of mainstream black media, and even tying it with like the mainstream black political class, is that, well, on the one hand, the Congressional Black Caucus and black politicians, they are just like, they're not there to advocate on the behalf of black America. They are just like, just loyal party members for the Democratic Party and donors and lobbyists. So people like, Hakeem Jeffries, for example, he is not there. He may say like, I like to, I'm talking to black and brown communities, blah, blah. He's not fucking there advocating for fucking black people. Like, he's just there to like, he's just controlled opposition. So the mainstream black political class, and this, I may even like delve further into this, but it's a topic we've talked about often, but they have both been completely silent on Israel. They've shown little to no support for Chris Smalls, and it's all because they are completely tied to the Democratic Party and the Democratic Party's donor class. So there's that. Meanwhile, when it comes to the mainstream black press, in like the hip hop media, I would say, and this is where like my anger and frustration comes in, is that you do need an independent black media to not just speak to the interests of black people, but to help develop an actual black politics and a black political agenda. That's the role I think that black media can play. And when you look at, I'm gonna pick on like the Breakfast Club and Joe Budden Podcast because they have such large audiences. With that platform, they can have like intelligent, like, I mean, the Breakfast Club to its credit, like they will talk about politics, but it's not like going toward like, okay, is there like a black agenda that is like coalescing? I mean, not really, right? So I think like overall, I'm not just picking on just the Breakfast Club and Joe Budden for sure. Like this, I don't know what fucking black politics is emerging out of that. I think this is partially why like I think black politics in the U.S. has been stunted for the last couple decades, is because one, the attachment of black politicians to the Democratic Party, and also I think the mainstream black media, its failure to speak to and develop a black politics that is not tied to the two-party system, and to develop a political agenda for black people, not just in the United States but around the world. That's something I feel like, now that I'm spitting out the top of my head, I feel like would be worth digging into another episode, but I don't want to. That's something I'll come back to. It might be worth digging further into that in terms of what I mean by that. But essentially, my main thesis when it comes to the failure of the black press is that, in addition to, I mean, there's the other thing is like, yeah, what I was saying earlier is so much of like black media, it overlaps with hip hop media, and it just becomes like this watered down kind of like culture war gossip shit. That's like kind of completely devoid of politics. But when it does talk about politics, it's either very shallow, or it's like vote for the Democratic Party, or it's not like there's no sense of black people coming together to talk in depth about issues that impact the black community, and then coming up with a set of policies from that. There are activists on the ground in black communities who are doing that work, but they're not getting platformed, like they should be, in my opinion. So I'll talk about shifting gears in terms of issues that impact black people. Hopefully I got like almost an hour in. So recently Trump, he's sent 800 National Guard troops to Washington, D.C., in basically a federal takeover of the D.C. police. Now, this obviously impacts black people because Washington, D.C. has a very large black community. Actually, let me check the stats. I believe it's mostly black, but let me check before I... Okay, so the black population of Washington, D.C. is a little over 43%. Whites make up 39%. Okay, so black people, African Americans, are the largest racial and ethnic group in Washington, D.C., but their black folks were not the majority, but were the largest racial ethnic demographic in D.C. Anyway, and actually the Trump doing the federal takeover of the D.C. police, that actually stemmed from Big Balls. I believe it was Carrot. Hold on. Big Balls. Doge. Oh, Edward Corstein. Okay. Also named Big Balls. He was appointed to DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. He was attacked by some teenagers. I think he was like intervening to stop like some carjacking. He tried to help out, and he got beat up by some teenagers. By the way, Big Balls, he is 19 years old. He was born December 2005. So he himself is technically a teenager as well. But he's an adult. He's not a minor. Yeah, he got beat up by, I believe, like 10 teenagers. So I think he's still with Doge. Oh, he's a staffer. He's still a staffer. Yep, he is still a staffer. Yeah, he was attacked while trying to stop a carjacking. So this obviously caught Trump's attention, and then Trump has been using fear-mongering about there being this large epidemic of crime in D.C. to justify a federal takeover of the D.C. police. Now, Washington, D.C. is a city, but it's not a state. So that's why it's easier for the federal government to take over the police, the D.C. police. But crime in D.C. is low. It's at like a 30-year low. But essentially, Trump's justification, he's equating visible homelessness and poverty with crime, and he's using that to spin his narrative of there being like this epidemic of crime. I mean, is there crime in DC? Yeah, but it's low. It's at a historic low. Now the National Guard, they're like just randomly stopping, frisking, and arresting black people for petty shit. And there is this Fox News article. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but on this podcast, but basically his thesis was it blamed black fatherlessness for black crime in Washington, D.C. Now, like I said, one of the main rebuttals to this would be crime in D.C. is at a 30-year low. Now, what's funny is that this is a very old stereotype of black boys and crime, and that like basically painting black boys as an inherent threat, in that because they don't have fathers, therefore they're born to be criminals. Like this is just a repeat of 90s era hyper criminalization rhetoric of black males. This is an old stereotype. This is nothing new. Now, lack of fathers alone, that doesn't create crime. You could argue there's a strong correlation, but that correlation exists because of poverty. That's the root of it. So if you have like a single mother, obviously you have like one less spousal income to raise a kid. And so, yeah, actually like lower income families and communities, you do see, there are higher levels of out of wedlock births in teenage pregnancy. So really the root of it that we're talking about is more poverty and class and economic inequality versus a fatherlessness problem. I would say like fatherlessness really is a symptom of poverty and economic inequality rather than a cause of it. It's more of a symptom that that poverty is going on. And yeah, poverty is that's the strongest root of crime, particularly like crime as it relates to like either violent crime or property crime, and the crime that like people don't like to see, especially like homelessness and visible poverty, right? So, at the same time though, well, before I say this, it is true within the black community that there are higher levels of divorce and even out of wedlock births, but that's not a cultural thing. Again, that's a symptom of, again, black communities having higher levels of poverty and like larger numbers of black people being concentrated in low income areas. So that would explain that. At the same time, black fathers are the most involved fathers in the lives of their children compared to fathers of other racial and ethnic demographics. I mean, it's funny because I'm looking at this political article with big balls being beat up, and it has a picture of Elon Musk. And it's funny, like, people don't point to someone like Elon Musk as like representative of white men being deadbeat dads. Even though, like, if you want a really clear example of a deadbeat father who just happens to have a lot of money, is definitely Elon Musk. He's definitely a deadbeat dad. And he has a lot of money. But the whole deadbeat dad narrative, that was used against black men and black fathers. But actually, by the way, there's further evidence of what I'm saying in the show notes as well for anyone who's curious. But black fathers are actually the most involved fathers out of all fathers of racial ethnic demographics. But the thing is that like black fathers aren't often married with the mother of their children. So again, this often comes as a result of like, black people in lower income communities having kids at a very young age, and oftentimes like having kids when they're not married. And so this is fairly common within lower income black communities with in terms of family dynamics. Like there will be a black father who's involved in, raising his kids. But him and the mother are not married. They could be cohabitating. They could be living separately, but like he still spends time with the kids. He's still involved. So again, this is a symptom of like what it's a result of it's a symptom of people living in like lower income areas, intergenerational poverty. Because even with white people, like poor white people, you see similar levels of out of wedlock births as well, and single mothers. Like there are plenty of white women who are single mothers, but they tend to be lower income, right? So again, fatherlessness, single motherhood, and I think when people talk about that, they're really talking about like children being born in terms as a result of out of wedlock births, and the father may or may not be involved in the kids' lives. It doesn't, because it is true. Like there is marriage. The institution of marriage does provide some stability for raising children. So I'm not saying that like people who I'm not making a normative judgment on people who raise kids and they're not married. I'm not making a normative judgment. But what I'm saying is that when people talk about like, deadbeat black fathers and fatherlessness is the root of crime, my point is that that's a symptom of poverty. That's really what we're talking about. And like larger numbers of black people being concentrated in low income areas, it produces those sorts of results. And yeah, poverty often correlates with out of wedlock births. There are plenty of poor white people low income white mothers who are single mothers, and then many of them they'll have kids young and out of wedlock. So anyway, but Trump's fear mongering And I brought up that Fox News article because I will say, unfortunately, I've heard some black people repeat similar narratives about black boys, about young black boys and how they act and raise. Like even there is some internalized anti-blackness even among black people, and it can even manifest in black people repeating false narratives about, I'm gonna just focus on, in this case, black boys and young black boys, because it is that narrative and the fear of like, oh, too many black people, and then like, you know, fatherlessness. Like it is that narrative that the Trump administration and Trump supporters are using to support this, to support Trump's the federal takeover of the DC police, even though it's not based on anything fucking real, right? Like I said, crime is at an all-time low in DC. So, and there are other ways to address, blight and problems of low-income black communities that don't involve mass incarceration and heavy-handed mass incarceration tactics. But really, what Trump is doing is, this is just a fucking dress rehearsal for fascism. That's really what this is. Is the dress rehearsal for growing fascism, and I think Trump wanted to institute martial law in the United States. It's very similar to Trump sending the National Guard to Los Angeles earlier this summer. This is the Imperial Boomerang. Fascism is imperialism come home. So as the U.S. keeps supporting Israel's genocide, and the war on terror, that ended with the U.S. withdrawal of Afghanistan, but there's still this, America still has this war machine in power, but it's not directly involved in any major conflicts at the moment like it was during the war on terror. Is still supporting Israel's genocide of the Gaza Strip. So now, like, the dirty work of America's empire is coming home to attack what the ruling class deems to be its own domestic enemies, and one of America's domestic enemies that it's long had a problem with since 1619 has been black people, descendants of enslaved African people in the United States. So, I remember, this is something I thought I'd bring up in this solo episode. In 2014, during the first wave of Black Lives Matter protests in the Ferguson uprising with the police killing of Michael Brown, I gave talks at Loyola University in Chicago and then Santa Clara University in Santa Clara, California. And I basically talked about my experience covering Guantanamo Bay, and I was doing a lot of writing where I was connecting the dots between Israel's apartheid against Palestinians and racial inequality in the United States, and using Guantanamo as an example of like practices that are used there that you can see both in Palestine and the United States, particularly when it comes to torture, targeted killing. Targeted killing in during that time was with drone strikes, but then the kind of quote unquote targeted killings that the Obama administration was using with the drone strikes, it was really more extrajudicial killing. One could argue that the police killing black people is another form of extrajudicial killing. where the police become judge, jury, and executioner. In the case of U.S. foreign policy, it's drones that became judge, jury, and executioner. Basically, the president became judge, jury, and executioner. The drones are just a means by which the president would carry out the policy of assassination or extrajudicial killing. And then the use of torture in Guantanamo, the torture of Palestinians in Israeli prisons, and also even the torture of even black people in America's prisons and at the hands of police. So I was making those connections, right? And at the time, I was just thinking about it. Looking back, to talk about that stuff was pretty niche. Like, the people who asked me to speak were usually students who were SJP, so students for justice in Palestine. And even within like the Palestine solidarity movement, like the people who came to the talks were super sympathetic and on board with what I was saying. But even then, it was like that narrative hadn't it hadn't reached the point where there are more people talking about it, if that makes sense. Like, for example, Chris Smalls making those connections, Ta-Nehisi Coates making those connections. I mean, during that time, like when I was giving those talks 10 years ago, Ta-Nehisi Coates was still a fan of Obama. And so my point is that I think solidarity between Black America and Palestine is definitely needed to fight fascism. And as someone who was talking about this stuff over 10 years ago, I'm glad to see more people talking about it now. And I think it should be talked about more in terms of making those connections. But it's something I wanted to bring up, especially like with particularly with the beating up of Chris Smalls. Anyway, I want to sort of close out a little bit. One last item, and then a bit of positive news, and then I'll close out because I'm already, like an hour, 16 minutes in. That's enough for me to record, so I don't want it to go on too long. My state's Patrick Bateman governor, Gavin Newsom, he's challenging Trump's redistricting efforts in Texas. So basically, Trump basically called Governor Greg Abbott in Texas to basically gerrymander districts in Texas to gain extra, I think like 5 extra congressional seats in Texas for the Republican Party, because I think Trump knows that he has his popularity is like in the fucking toilet. People are pissed at him. I didn't even talk about inflation and all that. I'll say that for like another episode, like youth unemployment, inflation, tariffs, the economy. So Trump is like, this is him just trying to stay in power. Gavin Newsom, I mean, before I say this, Gavin Newsom is a piece of shit. I mean, he is an elitist prick. As governor of California, like he is no progressive at all. Like he's at best like a 2000s era liberal. Like I think what made him a darling is when he was mayor of San Francisco, he did support gay marriage, which at the time was, pretty radical at the time. But now like he's trying to like, I don't know, he's doing like podcasts and shit with Charlie Kirk and like, but like it's weird shit. And he's obviously not a fan of homeless people. Like Newsom does hate homeless people. Like, he's been pretty harsh for cracking down on homelessness. So that is one thing Trump and Newsom share, is that their disdain of homeless people. In fact, that shows you how much liberals and conservatives hate homeless people. That's one thing they're kind of united on, among a bunch of other things, like supporting Israel and the America's war machine, well, actually now, like, I think more Americans are becoming critical of the war machine. But definitely liberal and conservative politicians are pretty much like on the side of the military industrial complex and supporting Israel. But another thing that there's definitely overlap is their shared disdain of homeless people, right? So, you know, yeah, Gavin Newsom, he is trash for a number of reasons. But I will say, like, it's just, given how fucked up the world is, I find it funny when Newsom is trolling Trump and Republicans getting pissed at him. Like, it's like, okay, it's actually kind of funny. Like, when Newsom really gets in it when he wants to go after Trump, it is funny. It is funny to watch. So it's like, if you're a leftist living in California, like, Newsom is a piece of shit. But like when you see him go against Trump, you're like, yeah, you know what? Like, you're like, all right, cool. Like, but what Newsom is doing, he's putting on the ballot for California voters to vote for. Basically, he's fighting dirty against Trump by basically changing up districts in California to give the Democrats extra seats in the House to counter Trump's redistricting efforts, basically gerrymandering in Texas. Like I said, I'm no fan of Newsom, but I think it is welcome to. I think that's for the Democratic Party, I think it's something that like the Democrats should do, not just that specific thing that Newsom is doing, but basically the spirit of fighting dirty, I think is a good thing. And I think more Democrats should fight dirty against Trump. It doesn't mean they have to like, I mean, I think like supporting doing similar kinds of gerrymandering to like, because that is how the Republicans have like been able to gain power in the House, is through like the crazy redistricting and gerrymandering. So like, I do think to counter that, it makes strategic sense for the Democrats to have like their own gerrymandering strategy. Basically, my point is that I think it makes sense for the Democrats to have their own gerrymandering strategy to counter the Republicans. Obviously, this is not a pro-Democratic Party podcast, so I'm not saying like everyone should vote Democrat, but given how much like the Democrats particularly under people like Senator Chuck Schumer, that they've just like rolled over and been like, well, we can't do anything. Like, it is nice to see at least one Democratic Party politician just be like, okay, we're going to fight dirty against the Republicans. That's like the bare minimum in terms of the Democratic Party acting as an opposition party. That is one thing they should do, especially given where we're at now, like with the Republicans controlling the Senate and the White House and the House. Like, yeah, Democrats are going to have to fight dirty and be an actual opposition party. So I think what Newsom is doing is basically the bare minimum of what the Democratic Party should be doing as an opposition party against the far right Republican Party. For those who are interested in building a further left project, like we've always said in this podcast, and I've often reiterated, the left, the capital L left, to have any power, has to build up the labor movement. Anyway, speaking of the left building up power, this will be a bit of good news I want to share, and I'll end on this. Actually, before I get to the bit of the good news, there's another point I wanted to mention. I just saw on my notes. Well, this is obvious, but I just do want to say it. To fix homelessness and poverty, like, because I was watching some videos about, like, like Trump attacking homeless people, rounding up homeless people. Like, for people like Newsom and Trump, liberals and conservatives people like that, who just hate visible signs of poverty and homelessness. If they want to tackle that, the solution is simple. Pay people more, have jobs with better pay and wages and benefits, and cheaper housing and public housing. Like, that's it. It's really fucking simple. You don't have to round people up and treat them like less than human. Because the thing is, a lot of homeless people actually have jobs. And by the way, there's a lot of adjunct professors, people with masters and PhDs, who are sleeping in their cars because they can't afford housing. And if you know about the state of higher education, over 2/3 of the faculty are adjuncts. So basically, part-time contract labor with very little job stability and no benefits. So yeah, there are plenty of people sleeping out of their cars because they can't afford housing. So that's where we're at. This is America. And Trump's solution is basically his approach with taking over the DC police, the federal takeover, and sending in National Guard troops. Like, that is the fascist solution to homelessness and poverty. That's their solution right there. Rather than paying people more, giving people better paying jobs with benefits, and building cheaper housing. And again, to get those, the left needs power, and that power, one of the most significant forms of power that the left has, is the power of labor, workers' power. And delving into the good news, the other form of power that I think the left should embrace is fitness and health. So I want to give a little bit of good news, despite how depressing the world is. Oh yeah, I got some blood work done last month, and I'm in good health. No infections, no STIs, normal blood levels, and I have excellent cholesterol. Not just good cholesterol, I have excellent cholesterol. I was like, whoa, what? And I talked to the doctor. She's like, yeah, this is really good. And she was happy to read it. And a lot of it, the reason why for those results, is due to my lifestyle. I cook the vast majority of my meals at home. 90% of the time when I eat at home. I make my own meals. I don't eat out as much. People who know me very well know that, like, I cook at home. I eat at home. I'm not like one of those people who's like, not to throw shade, but I'm kind of like, I'm gonna go to Instagram and like take picture of my brunch and my meal, blah 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 blah. I'm like, man, I'll make my own food. It's way cheaper, save more money. And also eating at home and weightlifting. This is something I don't talk about often on this podcast, but I want to talk about more. I'm really into weightlifting, and not for like bodybuilding shit, but more for raw strength and power. So I don't know how many of y'all who listen are like into fitness or whatever, but like my routine, usually what I do, I have like a push pull leg routine. So it's like every week I get a full body workout, but I split up parts of my body each day. So twice a week, legs and back, twice a week, arms, twice a week, shoulders and chest. That's pretty much what I do. And I like it a lot. So I do like the fucking, barbells. I don't do machines and all that shit. I just do barbells, like deadlifts, squats, bench press, overhead press, barbell bicep curls. I just do it that way. I don't do a lot of like the weird exotic exercises and shit that look fancy on Instagram. I'm like, I don't know. Some of that stuff, I'm like, okay, what are the results of that? Like, what do you? Because some of those workouts, I'm like, is this for fucking vanity to make it yourself look good, or is this like actually like building some real strength? Anyway, and for those of you who don't know, some of you do, but maybe I don't know if for those of you who may or may not remember or know, 3 years ago, my mother passed away of multiple myeloma. So if you're unsure what multiple myeloma is, it is a cancer of the white blood cells. This is something I did talk to my doctor about. It's a cancer that affects plasma cells and bone marrow. And those plasma cells, they produce antibodies to fight infection. So yeah, it's basically, okay, here's a Mayo Clinic, the Mayo Clinic definition. So multiple myeloma is a cancer that forms in a type of white blood cell called a plasma cell. Healthy plasma cells help fight infections by making proteins called antibodies. Antibodies find and attack germs. In multiple myeloma, cancerous plasma cells build up in bone marrow. The bone marrow is a soft matter inside bones where blood cells are made. In the bone marrow, the cancer cells crowd out healthy blood cells. Rather than make healthful antibodies, the cancer cells make proteins that don't work right. This leads to complications of multiple myeloma. So the symptoms include bone pain, nausea, constipation, loss of appetite, mental fogginess, tiredness, infections, weight loss, weakness, thirst, need to urinate. Yeah, my mom had almost all these symptoms, especially because she got diagnosed actually the year I graduated college, my senior year of college. Like the last semester of my senior year of college is when my mom was first diagnosed in 2010. And then she was in remission. And then after my grandmother passed away in 2015, right around 2016 is like when my mom's cancer came back, and it seems just more aggressive. But yeah, she had like almost all these symptoms. Definitely a little bit of nausea. Definitely loss of appetite, mental fogginess, tiredness, weight loss, weakness. Like, those are some very common symptoms she had, especially when it came back, especially during her second round of cancer, and that's when she passed away. It was like death. It was like death by 1,000 cuts. She just got weaker and weaker and weaker, and it was painful to see. And for obvious reasons, I don't like talking about it too much. I don't want to. I'll spare you guys the details, but it wasn't fun to watch, but especially someone who was near and dear to me like my mother, it was not fun. But basically over time the cancer, it weakened her bones, were like that's basically how it killed her. Even when my mom was getting ill, I got into weightlifting, but mostly with dumbbells. Then after she passed away, I made like a gym in my garage. So that's where I work out, and that was actually part of my grieving process, because I did go to therapy. Which apparently, like, I mean, I'm in favor of men going to therapy, but sometimes, like, the way people talk about men going to therapy is so freaking weird. It's like this performative shit. Like, I went to therapy. Okay, good for you. Awesome. Like, cool. I'm not trying to shit on people who go to therapy, but like, there's like, I don't know, too much like people treat therapy like it's some religious thing versus like, doing it because you genuinely want to get better. And that's why I went to grief counseling, because it was like, I was going through a lot of torment and pain. And I wanted to get better. So I treated it like going to the doctor, basically. But, you know, there's other stuff to navigate grief aside from going to grief counseling. Because I think people talk about grief all the time. Here's the thing. You don't fucking get over it. When someone dies, you don't get over it. And here's the thing. Death is a great equalizer. We're all going to die someday, including myself. I know I'm going to die someday. I don't know when. I hope I live long. But I know, like, my days are numbered. And so are yours. You're going to die someday, too. Just to remind you. But it's something like, you have to learn to accept that it's just a normal part of life. Everything has a life cycle. Plants have life cycles, seasons. Animals have life cycles. Like, everything in nature has some sort of cycle to it. Humans are no different. We have a cycle. We have expiration date. But we may die in a physical form, but, you know, depending on what your spiritual beliefs, like, you know, there is an afterlife. Like, there's a life, there's somewhere where our consciousness and soul goes after our body ceases its natural functions and we wind up deceased. So my point is that, like, grief, like, you never truly get over it. You just learn to accept that reality and integrate it into your life. And that is one thing I felt was the most helpful that I got with my grief counselor, she's someone who her specialty was like counseling people through death. And that's something that I found very helpful, is that there's no such thing as getting over death. We're always in a state of grieving, and honestly, it's fucking okay. There's nothing wrong with it. You just learn to accept that it's part of life, and you learn to kind of integrate that loss into your life, and you learn to like the pain and the trauma of grief. It goes away. The scars are still there, but like the hurt, like it, you know, it you feel it less as time goes on, and as you develop healthy coping mechanisms. Also, sometimes it is true, people do die of broken hearts, by the way. It's look it up. It's not uncommon for, like, let's say if someone loses a spouse, and like, especially for like elderly couples, right? Let's say their spouse passes away, a year later they die of a heart attack because grief, it could you know, it can impact your heart. Like, you know, it's true, you can die of a broken heart. And like, because humans were meant to care for one another. So when someone you care about and you lose them, you're going to hurt. It's going to fucking hurt. And it's a sign that you're human because you cared about that person, but their loss hurts you and you feel it. Not just, you know, you feel it in your body. Like, it's like, oh fuck, this is a level of pain that's very intense. Anyway, part of my journey in navigating through grief was actually through weightlifting, exercising more. And this is the connection I made. So, as I was saying, like, how multiple myeloma, what it does to your bones, weakens your bone marrow. Weightlifting, for health reasons, actually makes your bones stronger. So, for me, seeing my mom go through that, I was like, I want to make my bones stronger as I get older, because I don't want to go through what my mom went through. And actually, yeah, lifting heavy weights it actually can prevent osteoporosis, because you're not just like building muscles. You're making your bones stronger. Your bones are stronger. And anyway, when I was talking to my doctor, that's something we talked about, because multiple myeloma, people aren't sure like how it's caused, like what's the cause of it, because that's something I was always wondering. Whenever my mom would go to chemotherapy, it was like, when is this shit gonna end? Neither her or I knew it, and it's like, when is this gonna fucking end? My mom's just gonna keep suffering? Like, what the fuck? And even my mom was like, God damn it, like, this is what I have to look forward to? Like, what the fuck? Like, she was not happy. I was not happy. Actually, I found a New York Times article. Oh, actually, yeah. Here we go. From no hope to a potential cure for a deadly blood cancer. Multiple myeloma is considered incurable, but a third of patients in a Johnson & Johnson clinical trial have lived without detectable cancer for years after facing certain death. Okay, so there is hope for a potential cure for multiple myeloma, which is good. That's good news. I just hopefully the Trump administration, this fucking dope, the head of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr., doesn't fucking undermine this with the cutting to cancer research. This is how fucking sick these people are. Anyway, I'll put the link to the New York Times article in the show notes about the potential cure for multiple myeloma. But anyway, the cause of multiple myeloma is like up in the air. So that's something I asked my doctor. I was like, what's the cause of it? And she said, it's oftentimes like a genetic mutation, but they're not sure what causes it. It's like kind of random. But she does say that, like, if you are if you're the relative of someone who got multiple myeloma, you're at a higher risk of it. Which, obviously, in my case, since my mom passed away, that's something I fucking worry about, right? But the good news is that she said, like, look, if you keep up your lifestyle of like lifting weights, like, that's a good way to, prevent it. So basically, she was encouraging me to stay on top of lifting weights to, so I can have a healthy lifestyle, so that, like, I don't suffer that same fate. Because it is true. I'll Google it right now. Weightlifting. Yeah, weightlifting. It builds bone strength and density. So lifting more weights, resistance training, leads to increased bone mass, bone density, which reduces the risk of osteoporosis and other fractures. So that's why I made that connection, because, like, I don't want to suffer my mom's fate. So for me, like, lifting weights is part of, like, my healing journey. And this is, like, sort of my hot take on, like, therapy and stuff like that. I think talk therapy is good, but I do think that, like, for me, my kind of critique of it, and this is not, especially as a guy, like, I don't want this to be misread as like, oh, you're trying to justify a man should go to therapy, blah, 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 blah. Like, no, I'm not fucking saying that. I do think that, like, you have to do more than just fucking talk all the time. Like, you actually have to do stuff. And I truly believe that there is a connection between mind, body, and spirit within African thought, like, kind of ancient African thought, when it comes to how Africans before Europeans came. Africans always saw a connection between mind, body, and spirit. The separation between the mind, the mind and the body, that's a very Western conception. So even, like, in my opinion, my kind of hot take, that, like, even the way we think of therapy is that, like, oh, just talk out your feelings and then you'll feel better. To me, it relies on like a flawed assumption that you can separate the mind from the body itself. Like, there's not a clean separation, and there may be some therapists like, okay, you can feel pain like in other places, but I think like the kind of like Western approach to medicine and like body, there is a very like rigid, a very kind of separation between the mind and the body, and without paying attention to spirit. So, to kind of close out this episode, because I'm at like a minute and 45. Sorry, not a minute. Definitely more than a minute. An hour and 44 minutes. I want to emphasize the importance of being in good health. Physical health, mental health, spiritual health. I think that's very important individually on the left to embrace, so that we can be of greater service to the fight for emancipation and to be of service of others. So for me, definitely like, lifting weights helped me take care of my mom as she got progressively weaker and sicker, particularly with the diseases she had. The more weights I lifted, particularly just with dumbbells, it helped me do physical stuff that she just couldn't do because she got weaker. So I was able to be of greater help to her because I got physically stronger while she was getting weaker, And you can take that as like an example to apply elsewhere. Like, if you yourself are in good health, physical health, mental health, spiritual health, then you can be more effective in terms when it comes to political activism. Because sometimes like, I was listening to this interview with Butch Ware that he did with FD Signifier, and something that Butch Ware said I thought was pretty important. He said that oftentimes there are people who are in activist spaces who themselves are not like fully healed, and like there are a lot of people who go into organizing spaces and they have like their own issues that they haven't sorted out, and it could manifest itself in activist spaces and wind up doing harm to other people. So I do think it's important for like people on the left to, I really think that the left should embrace a culture of fitness and health and weightlifting and even combat sports. And I'll say this for like another episode, which I'm gonna close this one out, but I'll kind of like tee up the next one I want to talk about. I really reject this notion that weightlifting is inherently right wing, because I do think like there are some people on the left who I think when they look at stuff like maybe CrossFit or weightlifting or MMA, like they just associate it with all forms of reactionary politics. And I'll flesh this out further, but what I'll say to put a point on this is that combat sports like, martial arts like boxing, MMA, and then weightlifting, I would say those spaces are not inherently right-wing. And just because you do boxing or Muay Thai or MMA or weightlifting, that will not turn you into like a fucking reactionary fascist. However, I will say that those spaces, online and IRL spaces, those spaces tend to be either generally apolitical or right of center. Like if you go to a gym, it's not uncommon to go to like any kind of like gym or dojo and see like, for example, a Blue Lives Matter flag. You know what I mean? I don't think there's going to be a lot of gyms that have like Black Lives Matter flags, And I think I would attribute it to because like I think people in professions like, let's say, the military and law enforcement tend to go to gyms, and especially emphasize exercises like weightlifting, upper body strength, and combat sports. And so they're going to have more of a stronger presence when it comes to politics in those spaces. I don't think that there's anything inherent with the activity itself of weightlifting and combat sports and fitness. I don't think there's anything inherently political that will like swing you in one political direction or another. And I do think that fitness, combat sports, weightlifting, overall fitness itself is part of revolutionary struggle, especially when you talk about armed struggles, armed liberation struggles. I mean, those people need to know how to fucking shoot a gun and fight, you know? So, like, you know, it's kind of funny, like, when people on the left will talk about revolution this and blah, 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 fight for liberation. Like, okay, fight. Okay, what kind of fight? Like, physical fight? Political fight? What kind of fight? And are you strong enough to fight? Are you physically strong enough? Are you mentally strong enough? Like, there's various forms of strength, right? And so I think it's important to embrace fitness as part of that, to make you more mentally fit, spiritually fit, and physically fit. And even if someone has, like, let's say a specific disability, you have accommodations. Now, I'm speaking as an able-bodied person. So, like, if someone has, like, a specific, you know, physical disability, I cannot speak on their behalf as it relates to fitness. But I would say, like, you know, for the vast majority of lefties who, I would say, for the most part, are, let's say, able-bodied, right? Like, you know, someone who's not, say, like, paraplegic or quadriplegic or, like, paralyzed, or, you know, like, if someone has, like, a severe physical disability, they need a whole different set of accommodations. But I would say that for the vast majority of lefties, you know, most of them are able-bodied. I think that's safe to assume. They could, you know, embrace some form of physical fitness. And I think it's really important to be healthy and to treat your body well. Yeah, I was actually pretty pleased with that. That, you know, there was also my blood work that I got last month. So, and the doctor encouraging me to keep doing what I'm doing. Cooking at home, and definitely lifting weights. That's something that she definitely emphasized that like lifting weights is actually really good to maintain good health. And I think that's part of the reason why my cholesterol levels are, like, excellent. Like I said, my cholesterol level was not just good, it was excellent. So, yeah, and I'm going to stay, you know, on top of, you know, checking up with my body and, like, stuff like that. And, I never really shared, like, what I went through with my mom, and, like, the disease itself and what it does and the cause of it. And so I thought I would share that too, for anyone who didn't know or want to inquire even more. So for another episode, I'll dive further into the like weightlifting and politics, and like I do think there is like, yeah, there are a lot of like right wingers who are in combat sports and weightlifting, and they can sometimes use that as a pipeline for their reactionary beliefs. But I think part of the reason why they're doing that is because the left vacated those spaces. I think if the left were more in those spaces or had its own culture of fitness, lifting, combat sports, health, etc., like, you know, you can get people, you know, you can mitigate people from falling down that like reactionary pipeline. Because it is true, like part of the hook for this generation of like right wingers is like self-help and self-improvement, and like using that as like a gateway for reactionary politics. So I'm not denying that the gateway exists, but I do want to emphasize that like I don't think there's anything inherently reactionary about the activities of combat sports, martial arts, weightlifting, activities that would on the surface seem to be toxically masculine. And I don't think that they have to be, and I think there's a lot of health benefits for pursuing those activities, regardless of your background, either your gender identity, your sexual orientation, or your racial ethnic background. I think everyone can benefit from those activities. And I wanted to bring up an example of my own health in terms of how the results of my lifestyle of lifting weights and the results it showed for my recent blood work report. Anyway, blood work results, I mean. Anyway, I've recorded enough. A lot of my solo episodes tend to go on for long, but that's the spirit of it. Anyway, I'm signing out. If you like this episode, realsuncarhours.org, you can subscribe, become a supporter. $5 a month gives you access to bonus episodes, all that fun stuff. What else? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Keep the faith, stay dangerous. Love you guys. Take care. Peace out. Yo, what's up? It is August 21st. Right as I was about to so just edit and upload this episode, there was a response from Marc Lamont Hill and Joe Budden to the negative reactions they got to that clip of the Joe Budden podcast reacting to Marc Lamont Hill mentioning his colleagues in Gaza all being murdered. And so I wanted to I was thinking about like making this like a separate episode, but like I want to get this out, and since I talked about it in depth and like I really did rip the shit out of Joe Budden, and I still stand by ripping the shit out of him. He did acknowledge like he fucked up, I'll give him that, but like, you know, in this episode I tore him an asshole, so I'm gonna stand by me ripping him an asshole because he fucking deserved it. But I want to add this addendum to this episode. And also, like, part of me felt a little bit bad calling him and the other people on the podcast a bunch of overweight 45-year-olds. Because I was like, okay, I don't want to, like, use, like, making fun of whether or not someone is overweight is, like, a sort of low blow insult. So I don't, like, you know, so my intention, so I just want to kind of clarify that too. Like, I don't want to, like, you know, like, completely shit on people just because of, like, whatever body type they have. So, anyway, but my point in that comment, that insult I had, was really, my point was to get across is how stupid he looked, essentially. And there was a comment on Twitter, some people were making fun of Joe Budden, and I think it was after that clip went viral on Twitter, that, like, they showed some clip where, like, Joe Budden was goofing off in the studio, the podcast studio, and he had, like, a tank top on, and they said, like, oh, Joe Budden looks like Uncle Phil now. And he, like, you know, he has, like, a little, like, kind of beer belly and shit, and, like, so, like, in another respect, like, my kind of dig at calling him, like, an overweight 45-year-old, like, kind of stands. I'm not trying to, like, really shit on him, you know, because, you know, when people age, like, you know, bodies change, metabolism changes. But my point is that, like, the way that someone like Joe Budden comes across, he looks incredibly goofy because, again, he's, like, you know, like, gray-haired uncle, beer belly, 45-year-old age, and his response was equivalent to that, was equivalent to that of a fucking high school teenage boy. So it's part of the reason why I made that insult. So like, I just want to. So my point is, I'm not trying to like. I partially felt bad for like, okay, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but that's not the point. The whole, I don't want to make that the whole point of this addendum. But I do want to like update this episode before I release it too, because there was a response from. I didn't really see a response from Joe Budden on Twitter or something like that. I don't know like where he found it, but where he posted it. I mean, but Marc Lamont Hill, like he just because Marc Lamont Hill has his own YouTube channel. He calls it like Night School, and he streamed it, and he addressed it. So I thought putting this addendum would be warranted before I release it. And so Marc Lamont Hill, he clarified that like basically, and I'll put the link to that YouTube where Mark talks about it. I'll put it in the show notes as well. But basically the gist is that he was saying that he understood the reaction, but he was saying basically Marc Lamont Hill was trying to be charitable to Joe Budden, and his point was that his intention wasn't to say like, you know, fuck Palestine. Like he said that basically his point was that clip was taken out of context of a longer show where the format is very lighthearted. And to be fair, I also do want to be fair to the Joe Budden podcast. Despite my reservations with the podcast and how it's just run, like for example, okay, I've seen this on some other episodes. So they'll have like a warning where it's like, they say the thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the hosts of this podcast are for entertainment purposes only. I repeat, it is not serious. It is not real. None of it. No one is exposing, revealing, indicting, or telling you anything about themselves. Also, we do not encourage you to try this at home. We are trained professionals who do not have your best interests at heart or our own. Enjoy the show. Okay, so I want to be fair to the Joe Budden podcast. That like, the spirit of the podcast is purely for entertainment, and it's purely bullshit. So they at least acknowledge like there is a disclaimer that this is basically, they're not calling it a bullshit podcast, but I am. It is a bullshit podcast. It's for entertainment. The stuff said on there is not meant to be taken seriously. And so to Marc Lamont Hill's point, it was that like that clip got taken out of context where the format of the show is pretty lighthearted and kind of funny, but at times they do talk about serious stuff. So, okay. So, I just want to put that out there just to represent their response to people's criticisms. Okay. I still have my critiques. And in this episode, I stand by ripping him an asshole. Because like I just think it's just like when I was listening to Marc Lamont Hill and there were two other guys who were commenting, and I thought like, I'm gonna be honest, I thought they were being Marc Lamont Hill himself. And by the way, before I go on, Marc Lamont Hill is a very incredibly intelligent Black American journalist and academic, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't see the point of why he's on the Joe Budden podcast. That is something that still like bewilders me. I'm like why? Because like, okay, so if the point of the podcast, by the Joe Budden podcast own admission and their own by their own admission, that it's meant for entertainment, it's meant to be lighthearted, someone of Marc Lamont Hill's stature, I don't see the point of why he's on there. And I don't. Maybe Marc Lamont Hill explain why he's on there. I don't fucking get it. I don't see the point. It just, to me, it's like, to use, like, let's say a boxing analogy, right? Like, because if you're in boxing or any kind of combat sports, you put in weight classes, right? So putting someone like Marc Lamont Hill is like the equivalent of putting a very well trained and skilled heavyweight fighter in the same ring as, in this case, we'll compare Joe Budden to like a severely undertrained boxer who is is definitely not a heavyweight. Let's say they're like a lighter weight boxer, right? Like, in that situation, that would be an unfair fight. And that's how I feel like Marc Lamont Hill's presence on the Joe Budden podcast. He just, to me, he seems out of place. Now, maybe Marc Lamont Hill wants to go on there to, like, inject some serious politics and consciousness via the format of being on the Joe Budden podcast. Maybe he likes to talk about lighthearted stuff, pop culture gossip stuff. Maybe he wants to try to find some, like, middle ground between the two in terms of, like, talking about pop culture stuff, but also, like, using it as a way to drip by drip plant some, like, seeds of consciousness through gossip and pop culture on the Joe Budden podcast. Okay, but let's say if like that's Marc Lamont Hill's intention, I don't see how. I question how well it's being executed. Because to me, like, when I listen to, by the way, I watched the whole fucking, like, 3-hour long Joe Budden podcast. I'm gonna be honest, it was fucking boring. Like, and again, but the Joe Budden podcast, like, they're very clear, it's meant to be lighthearted and funny. And to me, I'm like I was saying, I don't, like, they couldn't, like, get to the point. They're just all over the place. I just, like, I don't really get, like, just in terms of a format level. I'm not even talking about content wise, right? I'm not even talking, like, the content part I'm gonna get to at a later point, but the format part, right? When you're putting out something like for news or entertainment purposes, right? Like, you have to make use of the format. So, like, with whatever stuff you put out there, like, you should get to the point. Like, there should be, like, a clear goal of, like, why you're watching it, right? Like, for example, okay, the stuff I'll quote unquote consume outside of politics that's, like, let's say generally apolitical. It's usually stuff like I follow a lot of music related YouTube channels and stuff related to fitness and weightlifting. And the music stuff, now here's actually where overlap with the Joe Budden podcast, because Joe Budden was a rapper in the early 2000s. So as a millennial, I remember when, like, Joe Budden was big when I was in high school. But that really was, like, his heyday. Like, by the late 2000s to early 2010s, he kind of I think he was still rapping, but, like, he wasn't as big as he was in the early 2000s during that era. Let me see. I just want to look up, like, when his I think, like, yeah, his breakthrough was in 2002. Yeah, that was my freshman year of high school. And then yeah, he was pretty much popular throughout the 2000s. And then okay, yeah, he was around in, like, 2008 because he had, like, a third studio album, Halfway House. But okay, 2017. I'm looking at his Wikipedia page. 2017 is when he switched from music to broadcasting, and then yeah, so it was right around then. Okay, so Yeah, he switched to broadcasting in 2017 from rapping. Yeah, he had a rap. I'd say a successful rap career, but he wasn't like as. I mean, he's not like as much of a household name like music wise as like, let's say, I don't know, like Kendrick Lamar or I'd have to look at the album sales. Like, I mean, I don't really feel like looking at it at this point. I don't want this to be too long. But my point is that yeah, his real heyday was more like in the early 2000s, and then like he had some albums that were successful, but now he switched to podcasting. So anyway, to my point is, his area would be, is obviously music, but his is more like hip hop and like rap beefs and that kind of like stuff or whatever. Usually when I look up the music stuff I'm into, that I look at as more kind of like music theory, philosophy, history, like and also like maybe sort of like gear and sort of tech or industry related stuff. So that's the stuff I'm into. And the thing is, and similar with like with the kind of weightlifting sort of like stuff like that, I watch that stuff too. But the thing is that like when you click on their videos, it's very clear like what the hell they're talking about, like from the get-go, right? Like when I was doing a lot of my freelance journalism, when you're writing, there's like the lead, right? So basically like it's very clear in like the first couple sentences of your article what you're writing about. The title is clear, subtitle's clear, and then like in the first like paragraph is very clear, like this is what you're talking about. This is what's in the news, right? Because especially like, even with like, let's say newspapers or magazines, you want to grab the reader's attention right from the get-go and then dive further into it, right? With the Joe Budden podcast, my issue was that it wasn't clear from the jump what the fuck they're talking about. And I have a similar issue with some of these other like for lack of a better term, bro podcasts. I mean, I don't know. I feel like even that term bro podcast is sometimes gets thrown around quite a bit. But I would say like the Joe Budden podcast, the flow of it reminds me of the Flagrant podcast by Andrew Schultz, or maybe the Nelk Boys. It's just like a bunch of guys with a microphone and they're just talking, and it's like, what, like get to the fucking point. Like, what are you talking about? So from a format level, I'm like, even when I was listening to that Marc Lamont, when the episode in question, right, where Marc Lamont Hill is there. Now Marc Lamont Hill is sort of a fixture on the Joe Budden show. And they just talked about like Marc Lamont's trip to wherever, I think it was like Martha's Vineyard or some shit. And I'm like, okay, so what's the point? Like, what? Like, is this is that the fuck, like, right there I'd be like, so is this the lead? Marc Lamont Hill to fucking Martha's Vineyard? And then like, oh, we're gonna talk about this and this, blah 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 blah. It's like, get to the fucking point. That's what fucking aggravated me about watching that shit. That's what beyond just the content itself. It's like, get to the fucking point. Even if it, like I said, even if it's something that's not political, you should get to your fucking point. It should be clear, like within the first minute, what you're going to be talking about, right? You have a title, subject, and you kind of get to whatever you're talking about, and then you dive further into it, and then you use like whatever allotted time that you want to dive into it. Could be like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45, an hour, or even more, right? But like you get to your goddamn point. So that's what frustrated me. That's what fucking frustrated me with that episode. I'm like, can y'all just get to the fucking point? Like, what the hell are you talking about? It's like all over the place. So I guess some people like that because it's something that's like lighthearted and fun or whatever. I guess you could play in the background or whatever the fuck. Okay, whatever floats your boat. But to me, I'm like, just from a media perspective, like, God, get to the goddamn point. Shit. So that was the first thing. Just the content, the sort of format wise, right? Because it is, lighthearted fun or whatever. But I'm like, okay, even if it's lighthearted and fun, can y'all get to the point? Like, and also, like, these people aren't funny. That's another thing, is that, because what Marc Lamont Hill was getting at is that this podcast is typically like kind of lighthearted and silly and jokey, but Joe Budden's reaction wasn't meant. He wasn't coming from a malicious standpoint, which, you know what, I accept that. I don't know Joe Budden personally, but I'm gonna take Marc Lamont Hill's word for it. That like he's not that Joe Budden perhaps is not coming from malicious intent, and same with like even Melissa Ford, because Melissa Ford had like a fucking dumbass reaction too and shit, and I don't think she was coming from a malicious perspective, but. These people aren't like really funny either, because there are some comedians I follow, like their YouTube channels are entertaining, but the thing is that they're funny, you know. So these people are this podcast. They're not that funny. They can't get to the goddamn point. It's all over the place. And the episode is fucking 3 hours long. Like, that's like Titanic movie length. Jesus Christ. So anyway, this is also, actually, speaking of, the format actually relates to the content. Okay, so the issue is that, like, basically, I think Marc Lamont Hill, he wanted people to be more charitable to Joe Budden because the nature of the show is so lighthearted and funny, they don't know how to transition to stuff that's serious. And that he basically said, like, they have talked about serious stuff before, but, like, apparently they have trouble integrating the serious matters with the jokey stuff. So, which, okay, that's something fair to tackle, right? Because, like, okay, if you have, like, a show, a podcast or format, and the nature of it is lighthearted, funny, entertaining, and then when you want to talk about something serious, okay, yeah, you have to kind of like make a transition, right, to kind of ease in from like the lighthearted stuff to something serious, right? So yeah, that's a fair thing to grapple with, right? But my thing is, it can go one of two ways. The first way is like they should just stick with entertainment and one, not have fucking Marc Lamont Hill and not talk about anything serious, period. Because, and me personally, I honestly think that the Joe Budden podcast should do more of that. That Gaza foreign policy is clearly not their lane. It's just not. Like, Joe Budden and Melissa Ford, like, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. It's clear. And I'm sure they know that too. They don't know what the flying fuck they're talking about when it comes to something that serious. With their lane is just like, let's just talk about rap beefs, gossip, and like, you know, other kind of culture stuff. Blah, 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 da, 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 da. Like, sure, like there's a time and a place for that. I'm not saying you shouldn't talk about that. And there's clearly an audience for it who they get clear value from it. And like, I'm clearly not the target audience for this. And that's fine, but I will say my impression is that, and I'm even basing this on a comment, I'm not just trying to pull this out of my ass. I would imagine that the main target audience of the Joe Budden podcast do not give a flying fuck about Gaza. Or if they did, like, I imagine that like the average Joe Budden podcast viewer has some semblance of a moral conscience, and I'm pretty sure they've seen images of like starving children and what's going on, and like I'm not saying that like the target audience of the Joe Budden podcast are like completely like amoral and completely like don't care. Well, let me reword that. I don't think they care, but like I think they have some level of a moral conscience that like they would see something like that as like bad and that's sad, and they don't like the image of starving children. But I think those people, the reason why they listen to Joe Budden is so they don't have to think about that shit. That's what I think. And so, like, if that's the nature, if you have, like, the people on that podcast who don't know what the fuck they're talking about, which I guess that's probably why Marc Lamont's here, Marc Lamont Hill is there, is to be, like, the serious intellectual type. But it's like, okay, I don't even see, like, how he's even executing that. Because I didn't see it executed well on that fucking episode. For sure as fuck not. Because if it was executed well, then, like, the show, they wouldn't have gotten this level of pushback. So clearly, like, they just fucked up. Like, they clearly tripped over their own dick. And so I personally think that the Joe Budden podcast, they just shouldn't talk about this serious stuff at all. They should just stick with the jokey stuff, be lighthearted, be stupid, be bullshit, and just stick with that, because this other stuff is not their lane. They're boxing outside of their weight class. It's clearly like they don't have, like, the chops for this. They really should just stay in their lane. And to me, it reminds me of when Adam Friedland was criticizing the Milk Boys, and he had, like, the same response. Like, but I really think that the comparing Joe Budden to the Nelk Boys and Andrew Schultz, I think, is, like, a good analogy, because it's a similar vein. It's just lighthearted bullshit, like, kind of just dumb shit. It's just kind of dumb, like, you know. And with Andrew Schultz, it's like being stupid, but, like, I want to say, like, offensive, anti-woke shit, man. But, like, I want to say, Andrew Schultz is basically, I just want to say anti-woke shit to be funny, man. But, like, if I have Donald Trump, don't fucking come after me, man. Come on. So that's the Andrew Schultz. And the Nelk Boys like, oh, we're just like some fucking dumb white boys. What's this like? You just pranks, man. Hey, that Yahoo, like, do you like Burger King, man? Like, come on, dude. Like, like it. Joe Budden is like, he's an equivalent that he's like, yo, man, I'm sorry. It's just dumb shit. And like I said, there are people who like that. There's a time and a place for us. He should just stick to stupid shit. And clearly, like I said, by the disclaimer, I'm going to read it again. In the second paragraph of the fucking disclaimer it says, I repeat, it is not serious, it is not real, none of it. No one is exposing, revealing, indicting, or telling you anything about themselves. Also, we do not encourage you to try this at home. We are trained professionals who do not have your best interests at heart or our own. They're being clear. They should stick with that. Like, they clearly do not have the best interest of the people of Gaza at heart. Like, they clearly don't. Like, they don't. So, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They're clearly outclassed when it comes to this serious shit. And when they do try to talk about serious shit, it's like, yeah, it's pivot the fucking jokes, man. Like, this is what's in the latest fucking rap beef, man. You know, like, just, if they're, his show is like just silly, lighthearted, just like this all man. Why you gotta be so serious, man? Blah. Like, just do that shit. Do not fucking talk about the serious stuff. They should just leave that to people who actually give a fuck. So that's the first thing. I personally think that first route, they just shouldn't even, like, they shouldn't have Marc Lamont Hill there. I don't get why the fuck he's there. I don't get why the fuck someone, like I said, of Marc Lamont Hill's stature why he even wants to be there. I don't know why. Maybe he has some larger goal in mind. I don't fucking know. If he wants to go on, is his own fucking business. But I don't, like, to me, it makes no fucking sense. I don't get it. But, okay, so let's say they don't do that. Let's say, Adam, we want to have Marc Lamont Hill. We want to talk about serious stuff, but we want to be stupid at the same time. Like, okay, fine, fuck. Like, okay, let's say they want to stick with, like, their jokey, lighthearted, stupid shit, and, like, they want to be fucking serious. Okay. If they want to go that route, they want to keep Marc Lamont Hill on there. They want to talk about, like, lighthearted, blah, 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 stupid shit. But then, let's also be serious and stupid at the same time. Blah. Like, okay, if they want to do that, then I'm going to go back to how long the fucking episode... It was 3 fucking hours long. Within 3 hours, Joe Budden himself even said, like, before Marc Lamont Hill mentioned Gaza, he was like, all right, we're going to talk about some serious stuff, like what's going on. Okay, so Joe Budden had already teed up. It's around like the 2 hour, 30-minute mark. So for those of you who don't want to like watch the entire thing, it's around like the 2 hour, 33-minute mark around there, where Joe Budden's like, basically, they got done 2.5 hours talking about like just whatever. Like, I don't remember everything they talked about because they're all over the fucking place. So that's another thing, which gets back to one of my other critiques. They couldn't stay on topic. They couldn't get to the fucking point. So that's why I couldn't like anyway. But around the 2 hour 33-minute mark, Joe Budden said, basically asked like, okay, what's the serious stuff going on in the world? Okay, right there, whatever like mental gymnastics that Marc Lamont Hill and the other guys, let me get there. I don't want to sound like a complete ass, but I don't, the guys who are with him. Hold on. Oh, Chris Emden and Imani. Okay. So, in a night school. Because even Marc Lamont Hill said, when he was sort of contextualizing it, he said that, like, basically he would rather talk about Gaza on, like, night school stuff, which to me is, like, kind of gets, okay, so why are you on the Joe Budden podcast? Anyway, so it was Marc Lamont Hill and Chris Emden and Imani. Like I said, I think they're being incredibly charitable, and so this is why, like, I think their charity to Joe Budden, like, they were, I think they're treating him with kid gloves when they didn't need to, and I think because, like, maybe they know Budden, I don't know, maybe it's a personal thing, but, like, I just think that they were treating him with kid gloves, and whatever charity that they're trying to give Joe Budden, to me, like, goes out the window, because right around the 2 hour 33-minute mark is when Joe Budden himself explicitly asked, what's the serious stuff going on in the world? So to me, it's like, well, Joe Budden himself asked, what is the serious stuff going on in the world? So he literally asked for this shit. He did. Because if he didn't want to talk about Gaza and didn't want to go through that awkwardness, why ask that question in the first place? So, like, why fucking ask? He didn't have to ask. He could have just not had that question at all. Just all right, let's end the show. Like, we talked for 2 hours and 30 minutes, and let's get to ads or blah 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 blah, like whatever. But it was within 1 minute that Marc Lamont Hill like shed some truth out of the world, and then they try to pivot. So it's like, it's within 1 minute of a show that is over 3 hours long, and to me it's like, okay, if they want to interject some serious stuff in a show that is its spirit, lighthearted, funny, entertainment, bullshit, stupid, whatever. Like I said, I'm calling it stupid. I'm making funny, jokey voices and mocking them for being stupid, because, again, by their own admission, they don't take themselves seriously. So if they're not taking themselves seriously, I don't fucking take them seriously. So, like, whatever really ridicule I give to them, it's completely warranted because they don't take themselves fucking seriously. So anyway, but if they want to inject some serious stuff, to me, within that 3 hour block, they can segment, like, let's say, at minimum, 30 minutes of serious stuff. Either, let's say, maybe the beginning half or the second half of the show. And then the majority of that time slot can still be for lighthearted gossip culture, which is what their target audience wants. Again, I'm not saying that their target audience is like completely malicious, but I think it's a fair assessment to say that the key target audience of the Joe Budden podcast like are the type of people who like generally don't give a fuck about foreign policy, but I think like when they see images of dead babies, it repulses them. So, and to be honest, that's not that different from a lot of Americans. Like, most Americans, for the most part, really don't give a flying fuck about American imperialism. Really the main time when Americans really give a fuck about America's war machine is like when people see like coffins of dead American soldiers coming home. Like that's usually when Americans start, because then Americans themselves start feeling the cost, right? Seth Harp, he's been doing some fantastic interviews. I want to get his book on Fort Bragg and drug trafficking of. It's like basically his stories of talking about like these like unsolved murders of former Delta Force guys who were involved in drug trafficking, and then he dives deep into like this shift in American militarism, and it really resonated with me because like when I did a lot of my reporting on Guantanamo and the war on terror, that was something I was observing, that like particularly during the Obama years, there is a shift from American militarism focusing more on global targeted killings by special operations forces, particularly like Delta Force, Navy SEALs, those types of units, right? In addition to drone strikes and all that. That was pretty much the Obama foreign policy. It was like, rather than these large-scale military occupations, expand the number of drone strikes in like quote-unquote direct action night raids, basically just global death squad shit. And one thing he said is that like Seth Harp said, that is, I think he hit the nail on the head. That approach to American militarism basically allowed the American war machine to continue, but without the number of deaths to American soldiers, basically. Because like, yeah, these like kind of special ops guys, they're very good at like killing people in the cover of darkness and getting out alive. So, you know, and also their missions are classified. So like you can conduct basically American militarism with one, less deaths of American soldiers, and two, under secrecy. And that was something he mentioned, is that like that's part of the reason why, you know, Americans weren't paying attention, because a lot of it was done in secret and there weren't dead American bodies coming home. So I connect that to, I imagine that's like the sentiment of like most of the people who watch the Joe Budden podcast. They probably don't give a fuck about politics in general, maybe tangentially, but they probably definitely don't really give a flying fuck about foreign policy. But I do think like on a moral level, like if they were to see images of like dead Palestinian children, it would repulse them. So given that target audience and the nature of the podcast, if they're trying to balance it, like they should have like a segment of like at least 30 minutes where they talk about serious stuff. And then stick to the lighthearted stuff that is geared toward their target audience. So they can fulfill some sort of like ethical responsibility of like injecting some form of awareness of what's going on in the world, while at the same time still being lighthearted. So I mean that's what I think. But I mean I appreciate the response, the clarification that Marc Lamont Hill gave. I think is in good faith. I don't think Joe Budden and Melissa Ford and others on that podcast are coming from a malicious place, but I just think that these people just like, they're just out, like they just don't have the chops for this stuff. They just don't. like foreign policy, international affairs, politics, current events, the state of the economy. Like, this is outside their lane. And I think they're just best to just stay in their lane. It's just lighthearted, goofy shit. I don't give a flying fuck about the podcast. There are some people who do, like, and if some people like to listen to Joe Budden because it's lighthearted or whatever, that's fine. I just did not. I don't like the fucking format. Oh, before I end this is one thing I wanted to get at. I looked up the net worth of his podcast. Their overall revenue is like more than $20 million a year. To give a comparison, Truth Out, who I have often written for, they are a nonprofit. For much of my freelance writing career, I was writing for Truth Out as a freelance reporter basically for a couple years. Like, I was like Truth Out's like go-to freelance reporter on Guantanamo. I wasn't like a full-time staff writer, but I was kind of like their de facto Guantanamo guy. And I would write about Guantanamo for other publications, but Truth Out, they are a 501c3 nonprofit, and their annual revenue is generally hold on, let me find it. Hold on. Their revenue is like usually around, I'm looking at ProPublica has some numbers. $2.67 million. Compare that to the Joe Budden podcast, they're $20 million. I looked up New York Times. The New York Times, their total assets is somewhere like $2 billion. So the Joe Budden podcast, I mean, they're not like in terms of how much money they're ranking in. They're not like New York Times or like legacy media network level of finance. But $20 million for like a podcast like that is nothing to sneeze at. So that's another critique I have, is that they're ranking in millions of dollars a year, and they're able to pay their staff, like, I think probably like, I'm kind of cruising through Google to get some like accurate numbers, because Google, they'll give you like an AI overview and then there's like links, and so I'm not using ChatGPT to get the fucking answer, like, but yeah, when you go on Google, there's like a AI overview, but at least it gives you links where you can dive further, which I think is like that's fine. But I think it said that, like, hold on, it's a New York Times article. New York Times article. This was written, earlier, actually last month. Shit. Okay. The money. Yeah, actually, according to New York Times, so far this year, the Joe Budden Network has earned an average of 1.04 million per month on Patreon. Holy shit. It has about 70,000 paying subscribers. Subscriptions range from $5 to $50 per month, with higher tiers granted access to more episodes, including from spin-off shows. This means its 2025 subscription value will probably exceed $12 million, enough to make Mr. Budden the top earner on the crowdfunding platform. Okay, so it wasn't like 20 million, it's around 12 million. That's still nothing to sneeze at. That is definitely more than Truth Out, for sure. And Truth Out like does actual reporting. That status and Mr. Budden's figures were confirmed by a spokeswoman for Patreon. But subscriptions are not the podcast's only revenue stream. Oh, okay. So this is like, they also do ads and stuff like that. Okay, so that's probably like where the AI summary got like the 20 million overall revenue. And it's not just from podcast subscriptions. They're getting it from ads. Okay, so they're ranking in a lot of money from ad revenue and definitely patrons. So people are paying for this. Okay, so people are paying for this, and clearly what they're paying for, I imagine the reason why they're subscribing is, I highly doubt that they're his subscribers who are paying $5 to $50 a month. I highly doubt that they are paying to get serious shit in return. That's just what I think. I doubt that's not their target audience. And I'm even looking at even the comments of that episode. Most of it was like just like random shit. There was one comment that someone left. It said, "My condolences, Marc Lamont Hill, for your colleagues killed in Gaza. That should be a 1 to 3 hour pod within itself, not no 25-second. Come on, JBN." And then other comments. "Seriously, they will say their position or their opinion about anything, but won't speak specifically about the state of the voiceless Palestinians." And someone else said, "They pick and choose like everybody else with relationships. We will respect it more if off rip they just said it and kept it 100 stood on it. It's insane what's happened that we all watching the people we love with voices stay silent. That should tell us how powerful the people doing it are." Yeah, so I mean that's actually, I've heard other people say it, like basically, yeah, they'll have like strong opinions about everything else and like gossip and all this shit, but when it comes to something serious, like they do, like that's another reason why I think Marc Lamont Hill is being too charitable, is that, and why I compare the Joe Budden podcast to the Milk Boys and Andrew Schultz, is that like they don't have the chops for this shit. They don't. They really don't. And they look goofy as hell. Like when they talk about this stuff, and they're clearly, basically, when everyone can see that they don't know what they're talking about and they look like fucking idiots. Like, to me, it's like Joe Budden, and like Joe Budden should not be surprised. And I don't think Marc Lamont Hill should like run interference for him. I really think Marc Lamont Hill should have been like, maybe been, okay, I understand where Joe Budden's coming from, but like, yo, okay, you know what, you could have handled that better. Just like, Marc Lamont Hill, I don't get it, man. I don't know why he's on there, and I don't get why he's treating him with kid gloves like that. And the two other guys who were on the night school thing, they're being way too fucking charitable as well. And I think like the reason why I brought up that podcast finances is because like, maybe calling the Joe Budden, I don't even think calling it a podcast is like maybe even accurate. Some of these podcasts are not like simple DIY independent media podcasts like this one. Like our subscriptions, we get around like $70 a month. So we're raking in like between $800 to $900 a month. In terms of a year, sorry, $800, $900 a year in subscriptions through Patreon, through people like yourself. And I know our operating costs. Like our operating costs are like fairly low. You know, it's just me and Peter. Like Peter does like the audio stuff for our episodes together, and he usually does the titles for the episodes, and I do like the show notes and stuff like that, and like you know, we have like low operating costs, and so like, and also to toot our own horn, like we put research into this. So me and Peter's a line cook, I'm a teacher. We both have day jobs, but we still make time to do this podcast and like put some effort into it. And we're doing this on a revenue stream that's a fraction of what the Joe Budden podcast is raking in. And given their revenue stream, their production value, because definitely their production, they have good production. I mean, they got good quality microphones, cameras, and they clearly have like a paid staff to do editing and like do all those shorts and stuff. Because there's a lot of, I think people like, you know, when you listen to podcasts and YouTube channels, like those of you who are listeners, you probably don't see like the kind of work that goes on to like produce that stuff. Like there's editing and like there's chopping and stuff like that. And like, you know, there's a way to like kind of get like with my solo episodes, I can just like talk record it quickly, edit it a little bit, and just get it out there like pretty quickly. But like they're doing like shorts and all these like camera angles and stuff, and like there's a lot of editing that goes on there, and like even like to get the best clip that make it go viral and like have it go on all their media platforms, like they clearly have like a back staff doing that stuff. So they have a staff, they have money ranking in, and like what also just like befuddles me is that they have the resources they have. They can't use it to devoting at least 30 minutes to something serious if they're going to have someone like Marc Lamont Hill. Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, especially with a 3-hour format. Because it's not like cable news where, in the days of cable news, when that reigned supreme, you had, like, you know, a short time slot to talk about stuff, right? So you had to, like, get to, you know, especially, like, the way they did, like, shows and news, like, you had to be able to, like, with TV shows, tell a really good story within, like, you know, 20 to 25 minutes, and then, like, you have to factor in commercials and stuff like that. So you have to be very good at writing and telling a story in a good show and narrative and characters throughout, like, you know, episodes that are, like, around maybe 20, 25 minutes each for, like, you know, that make up a season. And then, you know, so there's that. And then with cable news, you have, like, 30 minutes to an hour to talk about all the news going on in the world and like cut to commercial and all this stuff. And with podcasting, the thing is that you don't have to do that kind of that sort of concision in terms of time length. Like, you can have these podcasts go for like 2.5 hours, and that gives you a wide latitude to talk in depth about a lot of stuff, which actually is good for journalism. But they don't make use of that time to, like, to me it's like that, especially that 3-hour episode, to me it's like 3 hours wasted on, like, like, so anyway, I don't want to beat a dead horse. I think where I stand on this is clear. I don't want to keep talking about it, but I wanted to add that because and I know it definitely made this episode a little bit longer, and whatever. I don't care. I wanted to add that because, like, right when I was about to send this out, I saw that. I'm like, oh shit, okay, maybe I should add an addendum. So anyway, I wanted to address, like, Marc Lamont Hill's clarification, and even, like, give credit to Joe Budden that I think he wanted to take some accountability, which that's good. I mean, given, like, what happened, that's the least he can do. And I did also want to acknowledge, like, I'm not an avid listener of the podcast. It is not my thing. I'm not a subscriber. It's kind of podcast that, I'm gonna be honest, I find it stupid. And by their own clarification, they don't take themselves seriously. I'm like, this is dumb. I'm not gonna fucking watch it. So, but I tortured myself for this podcast to watch it for you guys, so that you don't have to, and, like, contextualize what actually went on, because that was the thing. They were saying, like, that clip got taken out of context. Well, I actually listened to the whole fucking thing, and, like, yeah, it was shit. Anyway, I still stand by what I said. Fuck Joe Budden. He sucks. I don't. Fuck. Just stick to your own goddamn lane. Don't talk about this serious shit. And if people on that podcast they could have easily done a much better job of integrating it. And my idea would be, like, maybe devote, like, at least 30 minutes out of a 3-hour long fucking episode to talk about, like, you know, maybe headlines of the day or the week. And then maybe have Marc Lamont Hill. And then, like, Melissa Ford's comment, because I mean, I'm shitting on Joe Budden a lot. I want to make sure, like, she catch some of these strays too. Like fuck her too. She was her response. I mean, I'm not trying to be too fucking mean, but her comment was dog shit as well. Like the whole pivoting thing, Jesus Christ. But like, what she could have done better is been like, you know what? I don't know. Like Marc Lamont Hill, can you explain this stuff for myself and the audience? That would have been a great way, I think, to integrate that. She could have been like, because like I said, I don't think she doesn't know about any of this shit. She could have been like, hey, I don't know about this stuff. Marc Lamont Hill, you're more knowledgeable. Can you educate us on like, what's going on in Gaza and what's going on and like kind of, and like Marc Lamont Hill could probably give like a 5 to 10 minute like explanation, and like they could even put in their show notes like research. I mean, that's one thing we do on this show is that we put show notes. We put links to articles and YouTube videos and books and shit for people to look at. And it's something, especially with the state of like this current administration, how there are some serious efforts to curtail the teaching of Black history and the transatlantic slave trade. I take the mission of this podcast incredibly seriously because I want to use this platform to make sure that history doesn't go the fuck away. Because clearly people like Joe Budden don't have the fucking chops for that. So anyway, let's just stick to them. Goddamn lane, Jesus Christ. Anyway, I said enough. I don't want to go on too long, but anyway, that's this addendum for this fireside chat style solo episode. If you like this, realsongcarhours.org. You can go on there, and that's our website. Patreon.com/realsongcarhours, $5 a month. And by the way, before I end this episode, I'm going to give a little teaser. One of our most recent bonus episodes, I am going to unlock for free. And in that bonus episode, I discuss a book I recently read called The Dying Sahara, which basically talks about essentially America's war on terror in the Sahel region and how it actually explains like some of the things going on, like particularly in the Sahel region in West Africa, and also kind of tee up some future episodes and topics that we want to talk about, like definitely Peter and I, and then on my solo episodes I want to dive more in depth and further stuff. I definitely want to talk more about the Congo, particularly how I personally think that like when people talk about the Congo, the one of the biggest parts of like what's left out in terms of why the DRC is the way it is oftentimes if you were to pull up a news article on what's going on in the DRC, it pretty much like starts at the 94 Rwandan genocide, and then a lot of the fighting that's going on is like essentially reprisals of the aftermath of the Rwandan genocide, and hence why Rwanda is backing rebels in the Congo. And then obviously people, particularly if you're on the left, and a lot of standard critique of some segments of the left is like what exacerbates the conflict in the Congo is the mining of coltan to be used in electronics. And it's like, that's all true, but I think like to understand what's going on in the Congo, that's scratching the surface. And I think the root of what's going on in the Congo is the fact that the Congo and northern Angola region were major sites of the transatlantic slave trade, and that played a major role in the underdevelopment of the DRC. So I think to understand what's going on in the Congo, you need to understand the damage that the transatlantic slave trade had on the African continent. Because I think it's kind of self-evident the damage the transatlantic slave trade had on enslaved Africans and their descendants, i.e. our ancestors. But what's often underappreciated is how much the transatlantic slave trade harmed the African continent as well, and harmed Africa's ability to develop on its own terms. And the Congo and what's going on there is definitely like a case in point in that. So that's something I want to talk about in a future episode. Want to tee you guys up on that. So yeah, there's going to be a bonus episode be released for free talking about the Sahel, and I definitely want to talk more about the Congo. This is Real Sankara Hours, your favorite Pan-African socialist political podcast. I hope it's your favorite. It's not a lot of us out here doing this kind of black journalism from that particular perspective. All right, guys, take it easy. Stay safe. Peace.